I stared across the courtroom and met his eye so familiar, it took everything in me not to break. 19 years ago, he slammed the door and left with a final sentence that shattered my soul. You are nothing to me. The years hadn't softened the memory. They hadn't dulled the pain either. And now, fate brought us here, not as mother and son, but as adversaries. I adjusted my blazer, the subtle weight of the courtroom silence pressing on my shoulders like a verdict before it was spoken. My opposing counsel, a tall, sharp-jawed man in his late 30s, reviewed his notes with quiet confidence. I already knew he would speak with clarity, precision, and charm. It was his trademark. It was mine once, too. And before I ever taught it to a jury, I taught it to him. My son. My only child. No one in this room knew our story. Not the judge. Not the jury. Not even my client. An elderly widow fighting to keep the home she'd lived in for 5 decades. A home being targeted by my son's corporate client for development. How fitting. How cruel. It had taken me years to rebuild after he left, after the things he said. After the divorce. After the rumors. And now, as if the universe had finally turned the wheel full circle, here he was, with polished shoes and ambition in his spine, standing against everything I stood for. I was the only one who remembered him barefoot on hardwood floors, chasing light with his fingers. The boy who used to scribble dragons on my court transcripts. The boy who stopped calling me mom the day he learned the truth. All rise, the bailiff called. We stood. The judge entered. And the trial began. I didn't stumble on my opening argument. I delivered it cleanly, years of experience sharpening each phrase. But my hands trembled as I returned to my seat. He watched minute with recognition, not with warmth but with the detachment of a man facing an equal. Or perhaps, a stranger. I had prepared for this trial for months. What I hadn't prepared for was the ache. Because in that moment, as the gavel echoed and the dance of justice began, I realized something deeper than strategy. He didn't just forget me. He had erased me. I never intended to be a lawyer. It was his father's dream. Paul wanted a wife with ambition, with intellect, someone who would match him headline for headline. I gave up painting to fit that dream. Swapped brushstrokes for briefs. Every piece of myself I gave up. I told myself it was for the family. But when Paul left, when the scandals caught up, and the lies unraveled, it was me they blamed. Me the newspapers cornered. Me our son turned against. He was only 19 when he stood at the foot of our staircase, his jaw tight, eyes red from shouting. You covered for him, he said. You let him do it. I didn't know. I whispered, truth fraying in my throat. You're a lawyer. You always know. And then he was gone. No forwarding address. No calls. No visits. Not even at the funeral. Paul died in 2014. Heart failure. Poetic, really. He always did have a weak heart when it came to accountability. But our son, his name is Caleb, though he never let me say it again, he didn't come. Not for the service. Not for the ashes. I buried my marriage and my motherhood on the same day. Objection, he said now, his voice smooth as polished stone. Sustained, the judge replied. I kept my expression calm, even as heat burned behind my eyes. Caleb was good. Sharp. He had learned not just from the best but from me. He wielded words like scalpels, slicing the witness's testimony with surgical precision. I should have been proud. I was terrified. Not of losing the case but of what this victory would cost him. Of how far he'd gone to erase his past. During recess, I stepped into the hallway and gripped the cold edge of the water fountain. My reflection in the stainless steel shimmered and warped silver threads in my hair, faint lines framing tired eyes. But it was the ache beneath my ribs I couldn't hide. Your client looks worried, a voice said. I didn't turn. I would be too, he continued. This is a tough case. When I finally looked up, he stood beside me. Close. Too close for comfort. His smile was polite, distant, professional. My client is fighting for her home, I said. You're fighting for a bonus. His jaw flexed, just slightly. She signed contracts she didn't understand, he replied. It's not my fault she didn't read the fine print. It's not about the fine print. It's about decency. He chuckled an empty, hollow sound. Decency doesn't pay court fees. For a split second, you remind me of someone, he said. I blinked. Yeah. I asked, keeping my voice steady. Someone good, I hope. He tilted his head, studying me like he was peeling back the years. She was stubborn, passionate, never knew when to give up. My heart paused. My throat tightened. What happened to her? I asked. He shrugged. She disappeared. He walked away before I could answer. That night, I sat in my car long after the courthouse lights had shut off. The radio hummed faintly in the background, some jazz tune from a forgotten decade. I opened the glove box and pulled out the worn photo I kept there. Caleb, age 10, holding a toy gavel, laughing in the sun. God, he had my smile back then. I traced his face with my thumb. I didn't disappear, I whispered. You just stopped looking. Day 2. Cross-examination. My turn. I stood with steady hands and a storm in my chest. I tore through his client's arguments, piece by piece. Exposed misleading language. Highlighted the manipulation of elderly homeowners. I painted the picture of greed with bold, undeniable strokes. Caleb fought back. He was graceful, commanding. But I saw it now how he faltered when the witnesses cried. How he shifted when the widow's daughter described her mother's fear of losing everything. His armor had cracks, and I would find them. Not out of vengeance, but because the boy I raised once cared. Deeply. And I had to believe somewhere inside this Monha still did. The jury looked tired. The judge looked ready to adjourn. The end was nearing, and the air in the courtroom hung heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. After adjournment, I lingered behind. He didn't notice me approach. Caleb, I said softly. He turned. His mouth opened then closed. I didn't disappear, I said. You left. Silence. People brushed past us. No one stopped. No one listened. Only him. Only me. You don't get to show up after 20 years and rewrite history, he said. I'm not rewriting. I'm remembering. There's a difference. His eyes burned. And what am I supposed to do with that? You expect me to jest. Feel grateful. No. I expect nothing. I just wanted you to know. I never stopped hoping. A breath caught between us. Fragile. Heavy. Then he walked away. Again. But this time, he looked back just once. And it was enough. 3 days into the trial, I noticed something strangely stopped meeting my eyes. At first, it was subtle. He'd glance past me when he entered the courtroom, nod to the judge, shuffle his papers, and keep his attention fixed ahead. But when I stood up and fought for my client with everything I had, wouldn't look at me at all. Which could only mean one thing. He remembered. And memory, once it wakes, does not go back to sleep easily. During a lunch break, I returned to the courthouse early and found him sitting alone on a bench in the atrium. His suit jacket was folded beside him, his sleeves rolled up just past his elbows, and he was staring down at a tiny crack in the tile floor like it contained some secret he was trying to decode. I didn't mean to say anything. I didn't mean to care. But something in me still did. Do you remember that little cafe on Garden Street? I asked. He didn't look up. The one with the blue chairs out front. We used to go there every Thursday before piano class. Still silence. You once cried because they were out of peanut butter cookies. You were 8. He turned then, slowly. What do you want from me? He asked. Nothing, I said softly. Just proof that you're still in there somewhere. He exhaled hard and stood, grabbing his jacket and slinging it over his shoulder like a shield. I am who I had to become. And who was that? I asked. The man who survived being your son. That stung, more than I expected, but I let it land. I didn't flinch. I'd earned that pain. I didn't protect you the way I should have, I admitted. I should have pulled you away from your father's lies the second I suspected. But I didn't want to destroy your world. So I kept pretending. He blinked at me, his eyes flickering with some emotion I couldn't name. You destroyed it anyway, he whispered. And again, he walked away. But again, he turned back. A small crack in the wall. A second chance, maybe. That afternoon, during redirect, I watched him challenge my witness, a financial consultant who specialized in contract predation more aggressively than before. He raised his voice once, enough that the judge warned him gently to calm down. It wasn't like him to lose composure. It told me he wasn't just fighting my argument anymore. He was fighting me, or perhaps himself. After court adjourned, I met with my client, Mrs. Callahan, in the hallway. She was frail, barely 5 feet tall, her cane clicking softly against the tile floor. Her voice trembled as she spoke. I don't understand how someone so young can be so cold, she said. Doesn't he see what this will do to me? I wanted to say, he didn't always used to be that way. I wanted to explain the boy who used to share his Halloween candy and sit beside me in hospital rooms reading out loud when I had pneumonia. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was keeping her home safe. What mattered was justice. Don't worry, Lorraine, I said. We're not done yet. That night, I found an old voicemail on my phone. It was dated July 12, 2011. From him. Before he left, I hadn't been able to bring myself to delete it. His voice was higher back then, still full of warmth and teenage restlessness. Hey Mom, I just wanted to let you know I'm at Jake's. I'll be home late. Don't wait up. And thanks for the lasagna. Love you. It was that last part that undid me. Love you. So casual. So unaware that it would be the last time I'd hear it. I played it again. Then again. Until the pain felt clean. Day 4. Closing arguments. The courtroom was packed. Press had caught wind of the case by now. An elderly widow versus a corporate development firm was headline-worthy on its own, but the added bonus of two high-powered attorneys trading emotional blows across the aisle added fire to the spectacle. He went first. He spoke about contracts, about law, about rights, about technicalities and logic. He never once said her name. And when he sat down, it was with an air of satisfaction, of victory. I stood, walked to the center of the courtroom, and took my time. I looked at each juror, and then I began. Once upon a time, I said, a woman opened her door to a man in a suit. She was tired. Her husband had just died. Her memory was fading. Her eyes didn't see as clearly as they used to. She didn't understand the forms, but she trusted the kindness in his voice. She believed him when he said, "Don't worry. It's just paperwork." I paced slowly. That woman is sitting here today. She has done nothing wrong. She is not greedy. She is not foolish. She is human. I turned to them fully. And this case is not about documents. It is not about loopholes. It is about whether we believe that decency still belongs in the law. When I returned to my seat, my hands were trembling. But not from fear. From release. I had done everything I could. Now it was out of my hands. 2 days passed. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. And when they returned, I felt the air tighten around my lungs. The foreman stood. "We find in favor of the plaintiff," he said. My heart surged. Mrs. Callahan gasped, covering her mouth with both hands as tears spilled freely. I didn't smile. Not yet. I turned to look at him. Caleb. His face was unreadable. Still. Stoic. Until he turned his head away. And for the first time, I saw something break. He stood and gathered his briefcase quickly, walked briskly down the aisle and out of the courtroom before anyone else had moved. I watched him go. I should have felt triumphant. I didn't. I just felt tired. That night, I sat in my living room with a glass of red wine and the silence of my empty house. A knock at the door startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, I froze. He was standing there. No briefcase. No suit. Just jeans and a black t-shirt and those same conflicted eyes he used to have when he lied about breaking a vase or skipping school. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside without a word. He walked in slowly, his hands in his pockets. The house hadn't changed much. Same books, same photographs on the wall, same scent of lemon cleaner and old wood. "You kept it all," he said, his voice low. "I kept you," I replied. He sat down on the couch like it might collapse beneath him. "I didn't know until halfway through the case," he admitted. "Not really." I sat across from him, my hands folded in my lap. "I saw something in the way you looked at me. Like you already knew everything I was about to say." "I did," I said. "I helped teach you how to say it." He chuckled once, bitter and amused all at once. "She deserved to win," he said. "She did. I didn't fight her. Not really. Not in the end." "I know." He rubbed a hand across his face, sighing. "I was angry for so long," he said. "I didn't know how to stop being angry." "I know that too. I wanted to hurt you." I nodded slowly. "And I let you." He looked at me, his eyes red now. "I thought if I cut you out, I could finally stop feeling so broken." "And did it work?" "No," he whispered. We sat in silence for a long time. Then, almost like a child, he asked, "Do you still have that voicemail? The one I left the night before I left?" I nodded. "Can I hear it?" I walked to the kitchen and returned with my phone. I played it. He listened, eyes glassy, breathing uneven. When it ended, he whispered, "I meant it, you know. The lasagna was really good." We both laughed then, for the first time in nearly 20 years. The next morning, he was still there. He had fallen asleep on the couch, curled slightly to one side, like he used to as a boy when he'd sneak into my bed after nightmares. I watched him quietly from the doorway for a long time. His shoes were kicked off, one arm draped over his face, and for the first time in years, he looked young again. Vulnerable. He stirred when I placed a cup of coffee on the table near him. "Morning," I said softly. He sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Morning," he mumbled. Did I snore? "Like a freight train," I replied, and we both smiled, tentative and fragile. We sat for a while, sipping coffee, listening to the hum of the neighborhood waking up. Then, he finally asked, "Do you regret it?" I glanced at him. "Regret what?" "Becoming a lawyer. Giving up your art. Covering for Dad. Staying silent." I let the silence settle before answering. "I regret that I let myself believe protecting someone meant lying for them. I regret that you paid for my silence more than anyone. But the rest no. Being your mother, even with the pain, even with the loss, I never regretted that." He nodded slowly, his jaw clenched like he was holding something back. "What about you?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Then, "I regret not calling you when he died." Those words, simple and soft, cut deeper than anything he'd ever said in anger. "I thought about it," he continued. "I even dialed your number once. Then I hung up. I didn't know what I'd say." "You didn't have to say anything," I whispered. "Just hearing your voice would have been enough." He looked at me with glassy eyes. "I wanted you to hurt," he said, choking a little. "I thought if you hurt like I did, it would feel fair." "And did it?" "No," he said. "It just made me lonelier." We were quiet again. Then, with a voice barely audible, "I missed you." Tears welled in my eyes, but I held them back. "I missed you every single day," I said. "Even when I hated you for hating me." He laughed gently through his nose. "I didn't hate you," he said. "I hated that I didn't know how to love you anymore." My heart twisted. But for the first time, it twisted with hope. He stayed for breakfast, then dinner, then one more night. We didn't talk about everything. Not all at once. There were still scars too deep for words. But something had opened. A crack in the wall we had both lived behind. And light was finally getting in. He left on the third day, promising to call this time. And he did. The next morning. Then again 2 days later. Then weekly. He sent me a photo of a dog he adopted, Rufus, a lumbering golden retriever who looked like he'd swallowed a sofa cushion. He sent me updates from court cases, asking for my opinion, even when he didn't need it. And one Sunday afternoon, 6 months after the verdict, I received a text. "I'm speaking at the local law school next Friday. Want to come?" It took me a full minute to process the message, then another to stop my hands from shaking. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied. The auditorium was packed. He stood at the front of the lecture hall, a polished speaker in a sharp blue suit, his voice calm and magnetic as he addressed a sea of eager students. I sat in the second row. He hadn't introduced me, and I didn't mind. This was his space now, his story to tell. But halfway through he paused, cleared his throat, and said, "Before I go on, I need to acknowledge someone." He looked right at me. "There's a woman in this room who taught me everything I know about law, about integrity, about fighting for what matters. I didn't always appreciate it, but I do now, and I owe her everything." He didn't say my name, but he didn't have to. I turned to me, and I smiled. Just barely. My son kept going, but the tremble in his voice said everything. That night, we had dinner at a quiet Italian place near the campus. After dessert, he reached into his bag and pulled out a worn envelope. "What's that?" I asked. He slid it toward me. "I wrote you this," he said, "the week after I left. I never sent it." My hands shook slightly as I opened it. The paper was creased and faded, the ink slightly smudged. Inside was a letter, written in his 19-year-old handwriting. I read every word. "Mom, I hate you right now. I hate how you look at me like you don't know me. I hate how you act like everything's fine. It's not. I know what Dad did, and I know you knew. Maybe not all of it, but enough. You chose silence. You chose him, not me. But I also remember when I was 10 and broke my leg, and you stayed up all night reading Harry Potter to me until I stopped crying. I remember your pancakes and how you kissed my forehead every time I fell asleep on the couch. I remember how you used to sing in the kitchen when you thought I wasn't listening. So maybe I don't hate you. Maybe I just don't know how to forgive you. Not yet. Love. Caleb." By the time I looked up, my face was wet with tears. He didn't speak. He just waited. "I didn't know this existed," I said, breathless. "I wasn't ready to give it to you," he said. "Until now." I folded the letter and placed it gently into my purse. Thank you, I whispered. He smiled. Next time I write you a letter, he said, maybe I'll just send it. I'd like that. Over the next year, we kept finding each other again. Not perfectly, not instantly, but gently, carefully, as if relearning a song we both once knew by heart. We took long walks on Sundays, talked about cases, laughed about old memories. He came over for Christmas, brought Rufus, who promptly knocked over the tree. He called me Mom again. Once, then twice, then always. And the second time he called me that, I cried in the middle of a coffee shop without shame. One spring afternoon, I received a letter from Mrs. Callahan. It was handwritten, trembling with age. She thanked me again for everything. Then she said something I'll never forget. You saved more than my home. You saved something in your son, too. And maybe in yourself. She was right. That courtroom didn't just give a widow her home back. It gave a mother her son. And a son his history. On a sunny afternoon 2 years after the case, we stood outside a small brick building on Pine Avenue. The paint was fresh. The plaque above the door read, Read and Read, LLP. Advocates for Justice. I looked up at him, my heart thudding with pride. Ready? He asked. I took a deep breath. Ready. We stepped inside. Mother and son. Lawyers. Partners. Whole again. We spent the first few months in that office with paint still drying on the walls and desks that wobbled if you leaned on them the wrong way. We didn't have much to mismatched chairs, a borrowed copier, and a shared secretary named Pam who had a habit of humming Broadway musicals while filing. But we had something stronger than business, resolve. We decided early on to specialize in elder law. Not because it paid well, it didn't, but because it mattered. Because we both knew what it felt like to be forgotten, underestimated, or left behind. Every client who walked through our door had a story, and we listened like their lives depended on it. Sometimes they did. Caleb handled the litigation. He had a fire in him when he spoke in court, the kind that made juries sit up and listen. He was fierce, relentless, but measured like he knew exactly how far to push and when to pull back. I handled the negotiations, the details, the quiet fights that never made it to trial. We became a rhythm, a balance, and we fought side by side. Every case healed something between us. And slowly, we started talking about the things that used to be unspeakable, like his father, and the betrayal, and how deeply it had cracked us both. One late evening after a deposition, we were sitting in the office with pizza boxes scattered across the desk and court documents piled high, when Caleb turned to me and said something that stopped my heart. I used to have nightmares, he said. After I left, I'd wake up thinking I'd gone deaf, that I couldn't speak, and no one could hear me. I didn't speak, afraid I'd scare the moment away. But the weird part, he continued, in every one of those dreams, you were there. You weren't saying anything, just looking at me, like you were waiting for me to come back. I swallowed. I whispered. He leaned back in his chair, arms folded, eyes distant. I think a part of me knew I was wrong, even then, but I couldn't admit it. Not yet. Not when it hurt so much. You were a kid, I said. Angry. Scared. You needed someone to blame. And you were convenient. I was your mother, I said softly. That's part of the job description. He looked at me for a long time, then said, I never stopped being proud of you, even when I said I hated you. I nodded, blinking fast. I never stopped loving you, I said. His voice broke when he answered, I know. One day, a client came in, an old man with Parkinson's and a daughter who was trying to seize control of his property. He was quiet, scared, and trembling. Caleb interviewed him for over an hour, listening carefully, writing down every detail. When the man left, Caleb sat still at his desk for a long time. I watched him. Finally, he spoke. That used to be me, he said. Not the man. The daughter. I said nothing. I was so sure I was right. So sure you were wrong. And I would have taken everything from you just to win an argument. He looked up at me. I'm sorry, he said. Not just for leaving. For the things I said. The way I made you the villain of your own story. I walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. You were never the villain, I said. You were just lost. He smiled weakly. So were you. Yeah, I whispered. But we found our way back. He looked at me, his voice thick with emotion. Thanks for not giving up on me. I almost did, I admitted. So many times. He laughed, wiping his eyes. I would have deserved it. Maybe, I said. But love isn't about deserving. It's about choosing. We sat in silence after that, letting the words settle around us like dust after a storm. Over the next year, Read and Read grew. Clients came through referrals. Word spread that we took on the cases no one else would. That we listened. That we fought with heart. We hired a second assistant, then a paralegal, then an intern from the same school where Caleb had once stood at the podium and spoken about second chances. The office walls filled with thank you letters, pictures, certificates. One afternoon, I walked in to find Caleb pinning up a framed newspaper clipping on the wall between our offices. It was from a small local paper, a profile piece titled, Mother and Son Legal Duo Defends the Forgotten. There was a photo of us sitting on a bench outside the courthouse, smiling mid-laugh. I remembered the moment. It wasn't staged. The reporter had caught us after we'd won a particularly emotional case. I had made some joke about how he was always taller in photographs. He had laughed and bumped my shoulder like he used to when he was a teenager. It wasn't a headline in the Times, but it meant more. He caught me staring at it now. You okay? He asked. I nodded. I just never thought I'd see this day. Me either, he said. He looked at the wall for a long time, then added, Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't ended up in that courtroom together? Every day, I said. And every day, I'm grateful fate forced us to face each other. Funny, he said, that something as cold as the law could give us back something so human. I smiled. Justice isn't cold. Not when it's done right. He nodded, slowly. And then he said something I hadn't heard since he was a boy. You always said that, even when no one believed you. I placed a hand on the newspaper frame. I believed me, I said, even when you didn't. He stepped back, nodded with quiet reverence, then headed toward his office. Before he closed the door, he turned back and said, softly, Hey, Mom. I looked up. Yeah. I'm proud to share your name. I couldn't speak. Not then. He smiled. I'll take Rufus tonight. You need a break. The door shut gently behind him. And for the first time in decades, I let myself cry not from grief, not from guilt but from relief. My son had found his way back to me. Not just in name, but in heart. And the woman I had once been, the mother, the fighter, the silent survivor, finally felt seen again. The spring Caleb turned 40, we were invited to a statewide legal conference in Chicago. I hadn't attended in years. Too much politics. Too many people who still saw me as the woman who let her husband lie. But Caleb insisted. You're not just coming, he said. You're presenting. I laughed like he was joking. He wasn't. They want a panel on elder law reform. You're the one who helped shape most of the recent legislation. You've earned that stage. I'm too old for spotlights, I told him. He raised an eyebrow. You're a Read. We don't fade into the background. I rolled my eyes, but deep down, I was touched. He didn't just want to share the stage with me, he wanted the world to see who I really was. Who I had always been. And so, I stood on that stage in a cream blazer and spoke about elder abuse, guardianship abuse, and predatory property practices. I spoke with clarity and fire, and when I glanced at Caleb sitting in the front row, he was leaning forward like a child watching his hero. Afterward, people lined up to speak to us. Some were students. Some were judges. A few were adult children with guilty eyes, asking how to reconnect with their aging parents. We stayed 2 extra hours answering every question. That night, back in our hotel, I sat by the window with a glass of wine. Caleb stood behind me and said, You know, you changed more than just my life. I looked at him. So did you. He walked over and sat beside me. You think maybe all those years we lost, they weren't wasted? Maybe they made this matter more. I nodded slowly. I think the pain carved space inside us. Space we didn't know we'd need. He smiled, soft and far away. Then I'm grateful for the pain. And I believed him. Because I was, too. Time passed. Seasons shifted. And so did we. Rufus passed away quietly one summer evening, his head resting on Caleb's lap. I held my son while he cried like a boy again, and for the first time in his adult life, he let me comfort him without pulling away. A year later, he proposed to someone wonderful, a fellow attorney named Rachel, kind-hearted and fiercely brilliant. The first time he brought her to dinner, she brought wine, laughed at my old jokes, and leaned her head on Caleb's shoulder like she'd always belonged there. I've heard so much about you, she told me with a wink. He says you made him who he is. I smiled, brushing a lock of gray behind my ear. He made himself, I said. I just kept the light on. They married under an oak tree in a park we used to walk through when he was little. I gave a toast that made him cry. I lost my son once, I told the guests. But somehow, by grace or grit, I got him back. And today, I give him to someone who sees in him what I always did. We danced to an old Ella Fitzgerald song he used to hum when he was 9. And when he pulled me in tight, he whispered, "You're the best closing argument I ever had." We kept the practice going, hired new associates, mentored new lawyers, took on cases that made headlines and others no one ever heard about. But the heart of it all was the same. We fought for the forgotten, for the people who reminded us of ourselves. And every time we stood before a jury, side by side, I remembered that courtroom all those years ago. The day he didn't recognize me. The day we nearly stayed strangers. What a terrible, beautiful twist of fate it was. On my 68th birthday, he gave me a gift I wasn't expecting. It wasn't jewelry. It wasn't a framed certificate. It was a red leather-bound notebook. Inside, handwritten in his neatest script, were letters. Dozens of them. Each dated. Each one written across the years we hadn't spoken. He'd written them and never sent them. Some were angry. Some were broken. Some just said, "I miss you," over and over again. I read every single one. By the end, my hands were trembling and the tears wouldn't stop. He sat beside me in silence. Then I asked, "Why now?" "Because I needed you to know that even when I tried to forget you," he said, "I couldn't. You were always in the background. The anchor, the voice in my head reminding me of who I really was." I closed the notebook and held it to my chest. "You were worth the wait," I said. He took my hand. "So were you." Years later, I began slowing down. I didn't try to hide it. My knees ached. My eyes tired faster. I forgot the names of clients I once remembered with perfect clarity. I still came into the office, still reviewed documents, but I let Caleb take the lead. "I can't run forever," I joked one day. "It's your firm now." He smiled. "I'll carry it," he said, "but only because you showed me how." When I officially retired, the Bar Association threw a dinner. People stood and told stories. About the woman who wouldn't back down, the mother who never stopped believing, the lawyer who made compassion a strategy. Caleb spoke last. He held the microphone like a prayer and said, "My mother didn't just save lives. She gave them back, including mine. I stand here today not just because of her skills, but because of her grace." Then he turned toward me. "And for the record, she's still the better lawyer." The room laughed. I didn't, because I knew deep in my bones that I had already won the most important case of my life. Him. The last time I appeared in court, it wasn't to argue. It was to sit in the gallery and watch my son defend a woman whose house had been nearly stolen by her nephew. He spoke with fire and patience and empathy. He wove his words the way I used to, with clarity, with purpose. The jury ruled unanimously in her favor. Outside, reporters asked him how he'd become so skilled. He looked toward me and said, "I was raised by a woman who taught me the law was nothing without heart." I don't remember the reporters' questions after that. I just remember standing in the sunlight and realizing that everything I had ever lost had led me here. To this. To him. Now, years have passed. I sit on my porch most mornings with a blanket over my knees and coffee that cools too quickly. My hair is fully silver now. My joints creak. But my heart feels full in a way it never did in my 30s. Caleb visits often. Sometimes with Rachel. Sometimes with their daughter-me-granddaughter, Nora. She's 7. Curious. Sharp. And full of fire. She once asked me, "Grandma, were you really in court with Daddy?" I smiled and said, "Not just in court, darling. We were warriors." She nodded solemnly, then asked if she could be a warrior too. I told her she already was. She now keeps a toy gavel in her backpack. Just like her father once did. Just like I once did. Cycles begin again. But this time, without silence. Without shame. Without forgetting. Some nights, when the house is quiet and the wind whistles like a distant voice, I sit in my study and replay that voicemail. The one from so long ago. "Hey Mom, I'll be home late. Don't wait up. Love you." It's worn now. Fuzzy at the edges. But the voice is still clear. Still mine. Still his. And now I no longer cry when I hear it. I smile. Because I know. He came home. Not late. Not broken. But whole. And in the end, that's all I ever wanted. Not to be right. Not to be remembered. Just to be found. By the boy I once loved. By the man he became. By the son who once disowned me. And now carries my name with pride.